Hi, I'm Larry Johnson. I am a professor at Texas A&M University in the Department of Veterinary Integrated Biosciences, and we want to continue our lecture series on the histology of the body. And today we'll talk about the female reproductive systems. Here we can see a drawing of the female system, and we can see the ovaries, fallopian tube, uterus, and the vagina of the female reproductive tract. Here in Body Worlds, we can see the different components of the female reproductive system because they don't only have to produce gametes, but they also have to have developing embryo all the way up to birth, and then have to nourish the offspring and recycle again when it's all done. And here we can see again in Body Worlds, we can see the ovaries, the uterus. You can see the large intestine there, as we can see in the Body Worlds. So the objectives are to learn the structure of the ovary, fallopian tube, uterus, cervix, and vagina, and to learn how these structures contribute to the main function of the female reproductive tract, and to learn how the hormones regulate or orchestrate the female reproductive system. That's our objectives for today. Now, there are different functions of the female reproductive tract. She has to produce ova. Of course, that's the egg for transmission of your genetics, of your lineage. And they have to transport both ova and sperm. So it doesn't just deal with one gamete, it has two. It has to do the sperm as well as the ova. And it has to have a microenvironment for fertilization to occur. And that occurs in the fallopian tube, and then it finally goes into the, for implantation and fetal placental growth is another component of the female reproductive system. Nourishment and support of the offspring. Once they get there, the mammary glands provides nourishment for the offspring. It gives them antibodies to get over until the immune system kicks in. And then when that's over, postnatal repetition. So to repeat over and over again as long as she has the eggs to develop. Now, what are the functions of the female reproductive tract? One is to produce ovum. So it produces ovum, the eggs. Also, it transports both eggs and sperm. So ova and sperm are transported. It maintains the environment for fertilization to occur. It allows implantation and fetal placental growth to occur in the uterus. It also provides nourishment and support for the offspring once the baby is born. And also, very importantly, is that postnatal repetition. Right after birth or after her period, then she goes right back into being receptive again, and that's just repeated over and over again. Here we see the female reproductive tract. You got the labia majora, and here we see the vagina, cervix, uterus. Here we have the tubes and the ovaries sitting right here. We can look at those on the side view, and we can see the uterus in through there, the oviduct or fallopian tube, the infundibulum portion that projects out, that covers the ovary and captures the egg and puts it in the fallopian tube, ultimately go to the uterus to be there for ultimately pregnancy. And so here we can see it in a real specimen. Here we can see the vagina, the cervix poking out there. We can see the ovaries here, and then we see the fallopian tube. So if we look at the ovary, which is the main component of the female reproductive tract, because that's the one that produces the gametes, we have a germinal epithelium that lines the surface. It's a misnomer. It's just a layer. It's really mesothelium that lines the surface there. Below that, we have tunica albuginea, which is really just a capsule, dense, irregular connective tissue. And then in the middle, where we see a lot of blood vessels, we have the medulla. And then on the outside, where we have the eggs, is the cortex. And we want to talk a little bit about the functional aspects of it and how it interacts with the pituitary, as well as the uterus as well. So here we can see those cells on the surface, the mesothelial cells, the germinal epithelium as they call them, and you can see they have microvilli on their surface. Below that is a tunica albuginea, and then you have the eggs below. So here we can see the tunica albuginea, the connective tissue, germinal epithelium, right in through there. We can see there is really these kind of cuboidal or squamous cells are on the surface. That's on the surface of the ovary. When now ovulation occurs, this layer ruptures, and also that makes it a prime opportunity for ovarian cancer to come from these germinal epithelial cells because they rupture and close so many times. So we can see the cortex to the outside, the medulla here, cortex in through there, and where we see all these cells. If we look at these different eggs, we can see some are primordial cells, and we'll be able to identify those a little, and some are primary follicles, primordial and primary follicles that we can see. Others are further developed. They have a cavity in here. There's just secondary follicles. And we can see here, this is the same as that with a big space in through there as a secondary. So here we see the oocyte, the oval, is located right in through there. And then you have the primordial cells, the primary follicles, germinal epithelium, connective tissue. We have different layers whenever you get the egg further development like this. The two layers of connective tissue, the tunica interna, tunica externa, become organized connective tissue associated with the granulosa cells. These are the granulosa cells which are in the egg itself. So if we look at identifying the different types of eggs, we will see the oocyte there's the nucleus of the oocyte, and then this here, and then it has follicular cells. These are supporting cells. And if these supporting cells are flat, follicular cells are flat, then that is a primordial follicle. If they're more cube-shaped, like that, cubed, then they are primary. And sometimes the primary has only one layer, but as it develops further, it will make multiple layers. So there's a zona pellucida around the egg itself, and then these are follicular cells that have proliferated. That's still a multi-layer primary. Both of these are still primaries. And then as you go on further to, you have an enteral follicle, that is, it has a cavity in through there which is filled with fluid. Then that becomes a secondary. So we see the granulosa cells that we saw, which is the same as the follicular cells. So these are the same as these cells here, multiply there. These, we call them granulosa cells, but they're basically follicular cells. And you can see on the outside the tunica interna, and the tunica, the theca interna and the theca externa. The theca interna and externa. You can see these different shapes, structures, and we'll talk about the how they contribute to the hormone production of the ovaries here later on. And then we have the granulosa cells, or the follicular cells, in through there. So you have a cavity, you have a more developed theca interna and theca externa. Theca interna, externa develops even further when you have a Graafian follicle, which is the most mature one, just about to be released. The membrane granulosa are the follicular cells that go around here. Membrane granulosa, those are follicular cells. We have the theca interna, theca externa there, and then we have the corona radiata. These are cells associated right around the egg itself, and the zona pellucida would be right in that spot. And that little hill is a cumulus oophrys. And so if we look at that, we can see the cumulus oophrys here. we can also see the corona radiata cells and the oocyte in the very center. These are follicular cells or granulosa cells, the theca interna and the theca externa as well. If we see that in relation to the ovary, there would be germinal epithelium here, tunica albuginea there. These are primordial follicles in through here with a flattened nuclei. These are secondary. These are several primary follicles, and then these are secondary or tertiary follicles. One that's going to be just about to be ovulated, and those are the ones we're seeing right here. Once ovulations occur, then these cells, the follicular cells in through there, the same as we've been talking about all along, they are luteinized. Luteinizing hormone stimulates them. Now they become corpus luteum, the corpus luteum cells. Now, all follicles don't develop. Sometimes follicles get ready and they're not chosen to ultimately go all the way. And so you can see those as atretic follicles. And atretic follicles have granulosa cells. Instead of being nicely tucked on the edge, they're out in that liquid. If you see cells out in the liquid like that, you know that that is a atretic follicle. Going to die. And whenever it finally regresses all the way, it becomes a glassy membrane. And we can see 3 glassy membranes right there, which were follicles at one time developing, got to the secondary or even tertiary one, and then ultimately became atretic, and the cells turn loose, and ultimately the thing would be like a little scar that we see. So we have the primary follicle, primordial follicles in through there, and this is a corpus luteum. Corpus luteum in through here. So a Graafian drew this is his drawing, and he drew the follicle with the egg in there, however, he thought the whole follicle was the egg, not that, and that's why we don't call it Graafian egg, we call it Graafian follicle, because he really drew the follicle which had the egg in it, even though he thought the whole thing was egg. This was 150 years after they had discovered sperm. And in the beginning, they thought the sperm were the babies, as your little animals, as they would call them. But then later on, they discovered that that the egg contributed equal amount of DNA material as did the sperm. And so here we can see the zona pellucida right in through there. This is the oocyte that we have, ovum, and then here is the corona radiata and cumulus oophrus, and these are the follicular cells that ultimately become luteinized. They become luteinized and become granulosa lutein cells, as opposed to the theca interna cells become theca lutein cells, as we see later on. Corona radiata, zona pellucida, this is your egg in through there. And ovulation. Ovulation has to occur. It has to rupture through the germinal epithelium on the surface, and then through the connective tissue, ultimately to be ovulated to occur. And so we don't really know. It just gets thinner and thinner and thinner, and then finally it just pops out like that. So the mechanism of release is really unknown. They don't know. Proteases are involved. Plasmins are involved. No pressure. It's not like it fills full of pressure and pops. It doesn't pop. Oocytes surrounding by zona pellucida and corona radiata. And so that's what's released. Lost at ovulation of a cow. So these cells are lost after sperm penetration in most species. So the corona radiata cells that surround it are ovulated with it. They're lost in the cow, but after sperm penetration, then you lose those cells in other species. After ovulation occurs, the area becomes bloody, hence hemorrhagial. And then and that's what causes the pain on one side or the other side of the females every month, and then the cells, the follicular cells, become granulosa lutein cells, and the theca interna becomes the theca internal lutein cells, as we can see. And so here we can see as ovulation occurs, it has to rupture to get out of here, and then finally that gets transformed into both a granulosa lutein cell and a theca lutein cells, which is on the outside, which were just basically fibroblast connective tissue in the very beginning. So you see the hemorrhagium through there, and as the granulosa lutein cells develop, you can see they form a very large mass of cells that you see there. And so in there we see the granulosa lutein cells and the theca lutein. Theca lutein cells are smaller cells. So we can see that right here. The theca lutein cells are the smaller cells, usually around the periphery because that's where they were in the beginning, and the granulosa lutein cells that we see. Granulosa lutein cells that proliferate, hypertrophy, transform, and that is what we know as luteinizing, and that's how it got the name luteinizing hormone. It's a yellow body. It has components on the outside. The little cells are from the theca interna. So we have theca lutein cells. They producing cells of a from the theca interna, as you will. The fate of these cells, if not pregnant, it was slowly regressed right away, and it becomes corpus albicans eventually. If it's pregnant, it's activated for a while to help maintain pregnancy. So that is in corpus luteum provides hormones, as we'll see in a minute, to help maintain the pregnancy, and also it helps to prime the uterus and the mammary gland for function. So the corpus luteum, we have the granulosa lutein cells here, and then we have the theca lutein cells, which are the smaller ones on the periphery. If we look at those cells, lots of mitochondria in through their very euchromatic nucleus, big nucleolus, so they're very active steroid-secreting cells. And so you can see lots of smooth endoplasmic reticulum in their tuber-type cristae in the mitochondria, also some rough ER as well, but these cells are what we see here in the corpus luteum. So again, we have the theca lutein cells, which are the small ones, and the big ones are the granulosa lutein cells. And so when you look at ovary with a little bit of the corpus luteum out here, it's like an iceberg. In it, there's a lot more inside there than what you see on the surface. Whenever it regresses, it dies at the end of pregnancy or at the end of the menstrual cycle. Then it produces a corpus albicans, like a little scar, a white scar that we see. And this is different from the glassy membrane, which was a atretic follicle. This is after the corpus luteum has regressed. So you get a corpus albicans being seen, and that's what we see. Now, how about the hormonal orchestration of the process? Of course, we come from the hypothalamus and the pituitary. The hypothalamus comes with the releasing factors, GnRH, and that stimulates FSH and LH production. And FSH stimulates follicles to develop. Follicle stimulating hormone is what FSH stands for. Luteinizing hormone luteinizes these cells to become theca lutein and granulosa lutein cell, which then will produce progesterone and estrogen and feeds back on the process. So we have FSH for follicle development secreting estrogen, and estrogen is what makes an animal, a horse or cow, come into heat because they have elevated estrogen levels there. And then luteinizing hormone stimulates in that too, but a surge of luteinizing hormone causes ovulation to occur. And in fact, that's how the birth control pill works, is that it prevents that LH surge. So you don't have a surge of LH and you don't have ovulation to occur. So you just don't ovulate whenever you are, and so you have less popping, and so that's one of the theories behind why if you're on a pill for a long time, you're less likely to have ovarian cancer. And so, because it didn't pop so many times, because you prevented it from ovulation to occur. Now, when ovulation does occur, and then the luteinizing hormone stimulates these cells to become luteinized, and that's your corpus luteum, which produces progesterone to help maintain pregnancy. So, GnRH in the pituitary, you got FSH and LH, and that stimulates follicular development or corpus luteum development. And from there, you have hormones, steroid hormones in both cases that feed back on the hypothalamus that we see on the pituitary. So the androgens, LH stimulates, cause the theca interna to produce androgens, yet it produces testosterone to start with. So that's the theca interna cells. And then FSH stimulates, causes membrane granulosa cells to produce estrogens. So these cells aromatize the androgens. So one cell produces androgen, the other cells uses that to aromatize it to make it estrogen. So you make androgen first and then convert it to estrogen. Estrogen induces further proliferation of granulosa cells. You have inhibition of FSH2. Follicular inhibits the substance of it. It has a negative feedback on FSH. Steroids themselves have a negative feedback, as we saw before. Progesterone, produced by the corpus luteum cells, it causes uterine gland development, also helps to maintain pregnancy. Relaxin also is involved, produced by the corpus luteum. It causes relaxation of the ligaments associated with the pelvis before parturition to occur. So relaxin is involved in childbirth. Now, oogenesis is the formation and development of ovum, and it has two components. It has a mitotic component, mitosis, and the mitosis occurs to produce the eggs. So you have mitosis ultimately to produce primary oocytes, and then once you produce primary oocytes, you are now in meiosis. So you had mitosis, which you want individuals to be produced identical to what they are. Then you have meiosis, where you want individuals to be different. You're different from your brother or sister because they have different exchange during meiosis. You're not different because of the mitosis. You're different because of meiosis that occurred in your parent germ cells. And so here we can see the mitosis occurs to produce the primary oocytes. So you have early development, maturation, or rest. So you have early development in the ovary, then they stop. Later development is synchronized with the development of the follicle. If the follicle, which around them decides to be developed, then that will go. Otherwise, it will stay as a primordial follicle, and most of them will regress as a primordial follicle. The first meiotic division is a reduction division, and that is it pulls two papas away from two mamas. And then the second one is just equalization division, that is it pulls papa from papa and mama from mama. And in this case of the oogenesis, it produces three polar bodies. And each time of these, it produces one polar body. But one of those polar bodies will divide, and that makes three polar bodies. So if we look at meiosis process, you have papa and mama. Both of them are duplicated. You have exchange to occur, and then on the first meiotic division, papa pulls away from mama, and then the second meiotic division, you pull these up. In the case of spermatogenesis, that would produce four offspring, four spermatids, which have a haploid number of chromosomes. But in the case of the female, the oogenesis, it's going to produce a zygote, because a second meiotic division doesn't occur unless it's fertilized. So this doesn't occur unless it's fertilized. So if it's fertilized, it's now a zygote. It's really, there's no counterpart to an ootid, because when it's fertilized, it's a zygote already. So it goes from it goes from a secondary oocyte to a zygote. Is where it goes. So a little difference in the male and female reproductive system. 4 cells are produced at the end of meiosis ovary, where only 1 would be, and that would already be fertilized if it occurs. Fertilized zygote. So in meiosis only occurs in oogenesis and spermatogenesis, and here you can see where Papa duplicates the chromosomes, Mama duplicates her chromosomes. They go together and cross over during zygotine and pachytene, and then the first meiotic division pulls Papa from Mama, and the second meiotic divisions pull number 1 from 2, number 3 from 4 for equalization of what's in there. So it produces a haploid condition, basically because you have 1 duplication of chromosomes and 2 divisions. And so species differences on the polar body formation. First polar body occurs pre-ovulation in many mammals, sometimes post-ovulation. And so a second polar body, in both cases, you got to be fertilized to get the second polar body popped out. And so what happens is many of these mammals is already occurred. So the first polar body has already occurred. So you actually ovulate secondary oocytes. And in contrast to this one, you'll be primary oocytes would be what you have. Here we see where a polar body is. Polar body is dividing right there. You can see the metaphase plate and the chromosomes pulling apart. So in oogenesis, what happens, you have mitotic activity. This is mitosis of the oogonia, and it produces finally oocytes, like primary oocyte. That's what we see right in through there. That's what's going to be there. And then meiosis stops. So it turns on, and then it stops right at the dictyate stage. So you go through mitosis, enter meiosis, and then stop during the primary oocyte phase. So it stopped. And then here's birth occurs at that time, and then you have the growth of the follicle. And so whether or not it ovulates or not, it has to do with whether or not that egg is chosen to develop further. Most of them don't develop. They die as a primordial oocyte, primordial follicle with the primary oocyte inside there. If that oocyte is chosen for its follicle to be developed, it will be turned back on. So it turns back on for the first meiotic division, and it's turned off again. So on, off, on, off. And then it won't be turned on again unless fertilized. And so this would be in the second meiotic division. So in the case of spermatogenesis, it's turned on, you either go or you're dead. But in the case of oogenesis, it's on and off after it enters meiosis until it's called upon with a follicular development, and then it has to be fertilized before it's called upon for the final to complete meiosis to occur. Now we've been talking about the different types of follicles, primordial follicles. You also have the primary follicles and secondary follicles. And here we can see the germ cells that are, you have the primary oocyte in every one of them. So you haven't started the meiotic division until the end, just before ovulation occurs. And so primordial oocyte, the same thing. Primary oocyte is the same thing. And then whenever, right before ovulation, it depends upon the species. It can be primary or secondary. That is actually ovulated, depending upon the species. So now if we look at the fallopian tube, we can see the fallopian, there's the ovary, there's the fallopian tube. If we look part of it, this is the infundibulum. This is a finger-like projection that covers over the ovary that captures the egg when it ruptures off the surface of the ovary. And then as you come on down, you got the ampulla, isthmus, and then the internal segment, which is looking more like the uterus. So it goes from those that look like the infundibulum to those that look like the uterus. And so here we can see the fimbria of the infundibulum region. And if you look at those cells, they're ciliated cells, so they make up a little current to sweep the egg inside there is what it's doing. And so as you move on down to the ampulla, you see it looks a lot like the infundibulum, but then it's more closure and it's completely closed by the muscularis, smooth muscle cells. And then when you get on down further, you get more layers. You can see that I've got ciliated cells on there and some goblet cells as well. And so the height of these depend upon estrogen flowing, whether they're tall or not. This is pre-menstrual, and this is in the mid-cycle. So this will be fully developed, and this would be recovering. So the oviduct, we can see there, in the normal case, you got ciliated cells on the surface. Lack of estrogen, you have shorter cells and a lack of functionality of the cells, and sometimes that's a problem if the female is not responding to the estrogen levels that she has. And here we see the oviduct with ciliated cells and some cells with microvilli on the surface. So the egg comes from the ovary, it's picked up by the infundibulum, carried down in the oviduct to the different portions, and you get fertilization to occur. So sperm fertilizes the egg, but the egg continues to travel down there for, say, 5 days or so before the uterus is ready, because the uterus is not ready right now. It takes about 5 days before it's ready. So it occurs, you've got to provide nutrients for the developing egg, environment for fertilization to occur, and then finally the fertilized egg will implant, as we can see. So there are different steps in the process. The sperm has to bind, undergoes the acrosome reaction, and here we can see the acrosome reaction. This is your typical sperm with an intact cell membrane and acrosomal membrane. But for the acrosome reaction, you have fusion of the outer acrosomal membrane and the cell membrane, and that will cause the little vesicles, and that release the enzymes. And those enzymes are necessary to penetrate through the corona radiata cells that are still stuck there, and then also to penetrate through the zona pellucida of the female. And so this is the zona pellucida. You need the acrosome reaction, go through the zona pellucida, then it fuses with the cell membrane of the egg, and then the sperm comes inside there and makes an oval. Whenever that occurs, that causes cortical reaction. That is, cortical granules discharge into this space, and that prevents any additional sperm from going through. Now here we see the uterus. We have the myometrium and the endometrium. So this is the glandular part, and this is the muscle part, and then we have ligaments holding it on. So the perimetrium we don't have. The myometrium muscle. Endometrium has two parts. It's got a basal part and it's got a functional part that we can see, and that will vary with the time of the cycle. So if we look at the cycle, you see after menstruation has occurred, and we say that's day 0 because we can observe that, and then after that. You have regeneration to occur. You get proliferation, secretion, and if you're not pregnant, the corpus luteum will regress, and that will cause ischemia. And what happens is you have these spiraling arteries and we can see these arteries in through here spiraling up, and they send out shoots to support the developed. This is this is a functional layer, developing functional layer. If ischemia occurs by drawing back of the spiraling arteries and shutting down the nutrients to these cells, and ultimately it's sloughed off, and that's the source of the discharge for an administration to occur. So here we can see the different days and what's influenced. You have estrogen influence in the beginning, and then after ovulation you have progesterone and estrogen influence. And that progesterone is coming from the corpus luteum. If the corpus luteum regressed, the progesterone is not being produced, and as a consequence you will get ischemia to occur and the onset of menstruation to occur. So if we look at this in relation to the hypothalamus and the pituitary, you can see that FSH comes from the pituitary, stimulate follicular development, stimulate estrogen production, which then causes proliferation to recur. You got the regeneration and proliferation to occur under estrogen influence. Whenever you have a LH surge that causes ovulation, and then that transforms that into a corpus luteum, and then ultimately it becomes a corpus albicans. But in meantime, it would maintain pregnancy if pregnancy had occurred. Here we see where the glands are just sloughed off, and you get blood out through there during menstruation to occur. And here we can see the whole cycle. You've got menstrual phase. After menstrual phase, you've got the early proliferation phase, late proliferation phase, early secretory phase, and late secretory phases. So these are different days of the 28 day cycle. And if she's not pregnant, then the process is just repeated again. So here we can see the changes on the endometrium, fertilization to occur, and that corresponding corpus luteum has been maintained whenever pregnancies occurred like that. Here we see a human uterus tissue. This is a muscle. This is endothelium, and we can see where the membranes of a fetus were right there. And so we can see that as implantation occurs, it just invades in this region, and then we have the residual reaction, which causes the fibroblast-like cells to prevent any further degradation. Decidual reaction, where fibroblasts look more like plump cells and through there, and they prevent the fetus from going any further back in the development. So here we can see the different ones. You have the placenta forming here. Here we can see the baby inside the individual. And of course, some of these images were not well received in some countries. Here we have the discoid type placenta with the umbilical cord going through there. And here we can see the baby is quite large with its head down low, so it can come out head first. From the uterus, then we have the cervix, and you got the cervix. On one side is stratified squamous epithelium like the vagina, and on the other side it's a secretory type like simple columnar epithelium that we can see. Here we see the mucus that's produced, the cervical mucus that's produced, and then as you come on down through here, we see the simple columnar epithelium of the cervix, and then all of a sudden it abruptly changes right at the exocervix when it occurs there as a junction between the two different types of epithelium, simple columnar and stratified squamous epithelium, and as a rule this is a site for cancer to occur. So it's stratified squamous epithelium, non-keratinized in the vagina. And that's what we see right there. And we can see muscle in through there as well. And we can see individual cells, non-keratinized as the nucleus. It still persists all the way on the surface. Now, once pregnancy is over, the female is still active to nourishment and protection of the offspring. The mammal mothers have milk, and the milk that can be given to the baby on demand, even if the mother hasn't eaten yet. Here we see the mammary gland with the secretory units in through there, and then you have these ducts. Ultimately bring several ducts out here, and here we can see the inactive one with early proliferation, and then the one with secretion with milk in it itself. So this is the main milk-producing cell. Milk has fat in it, and fat is not water-soluble, so therefore you have to have a apricot-type secretion that puts a plasma membrane around the lipid so it can stay suspended in milk. In contrast, casein and other things comes out with American-type secretion, just like general exocytosis. Now, in order to get milk out, you have to squeeze the alveoli. And here we can see how the myoid epithelial layer, we can see the myoepithelium over there, forms a mesh over the outside of the gland and squeezes that down to cause milk ejection to occur. Now, in terms of development of the mammary gland depends upon the hormone status. And so estrogen would help develop cells in the mammary gland, and also progesterone would too. And then finally, prolactin is involved in the production of milk itself. So we can see some inactive and active ones, milk secreting cells. And here we can see several mammals doing what mammals do, namely that babies nurse from their mother's mammary gland. You might note that a goat has a mammary gland in the back, like the cow, but the elephant has it between the front legs, more like humans. Now, the mammary gland is responsible for our class, the class that we're in, Mammalia. And so that, along with hair and what's the other thing? With the mammary gland, hair, and special ear bones, that's what makes a mammal. Here we can see the fetal development that occurs, of course, in the uterus itself. You can see where a little baby is developing here. And then also there's disease states, including the germinal epithelial cells that could cause cancer from ovary. In this case, it came in through there and was developed all the way up to here, and it was this portion that they cut out that was interfering with the heart. So this patient was presenting heart problem even though it was an ovarian cancer. So we talked about the ovary, the follicles, the hormones it produce, the different structures that are inside there, the primordial, primary, secondary, Graafian follicles, the development of the corpus luteum, and then the corpus albicans. We also, and here we can see the corpus luteum, the primary follicle, and the primordial follicles up there, germinal epithelium. So that's the female reproductive tract. Look at this female here. She is interacting with that skeleton. That is not just a bunch of bones to her. It is something else, really neat. So in summary, what the female does is very important in terms of contribution to reproduction. She produces ova, but also transport ova and sperm. At the microenvironment, fertilization to occur, cause implantation, fetal placental growth, nourishment of the offspring, and then repeat the whole thing again after pregnancy has occurred. And whenever fertilization of the egg occurs, and gestation is complete, you end up with a good product on the ground. Thank you. If this information was useful, please use it. Share it with your neighbor. And thank you. This is the last lecture that we have of this lecture series for histology. Good luck on your career.